Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining us this evening, both here in the room, but also online. I'm not entirely sure how many we've got online, but we had over 100 registered, and I can hear from the binging, people joining us all the time. And we know that there are people from all over the world actually joining us this evening, so thank you all very much for coming. We're really delighted to have you join us here. It's a very special occasion, a professorial inaugural lecture, and certainly it's one of one's career highlights. And I've been trying to encourage Adam to enjoy it. As he said that he'll enjoy it once it's all over. But I've also suggested, of course, that we're all friends and supporters, which is why we're all here. So I think that's absolutely the case. It certainly is a momentous occasion in one's career to certainly reach the professorship and obviously the pleasure of giving a lecture like this. So I'm sure, like me, you're all looking forward to this. So just a couple of housekeeping duties. We are not expecting any fire alarms. So if you do hear a fire alarm, it's real. For those of you who are not familiar with the building, firstly, welcome, but please leave by any of the fire exits here and go down the stairs and outside the door. Please, if the SAMS people who are here, if there are people around you who you don't recognise, they're likely to be visitors, so help them out of the building, please. That would be welcome. Thank you very much. And for those of you who haven't found them yet, the restrooms are out of the door just across the corridor there. Once we've had the lecture, and we'll have a question and answer session, where shall be an opportunity for us all to interact with Adam. And then, following that, for those of us here, we will have a reception in the room adjoining. So obviously everybody's welcome to attend that, so thank you. I have had the great pleasure, I should say I'm Nick Owens. I'm the director of SAMS here. So it's a great honour and pleasure to be the director here, but secondly to be able to officiate on occasions like this. And it's been a pleasure to work with Adam over the last 10 years that I've been here. And it's a pleasure to introduce you to him. He started out life as a marine biologist, maybe possibly before we know this, but formally in 1991 when he went to the University College Swansea to do a marine biology degree. And then in 1996, he did a Masters of Research, which these days we would call an MRes. I think maybe it was called an MRes then as well, but anyway, Masters of Research at the University of York. His first association with SAMS, as far as I'm aware, was in 2002, when he joined us to pursue a PhD on sea urchin grazing. Now, in those days, the University of the Highlands and Islands did not have university status and did not award its own degrees. So the PhD degree that Adam achieved from that period was actually from the Open University. But we're delighted, a number of years ago, the university got degree awarding powers. As a matter of interest, SAMS was a founding member of what was then originally called the Millennium Institute, which became the University of the Highlands and Islands. Following his PhD in 2006, Adam went to become a postdoctoral visiting researcher at the University of Texas, where he worked on coral bleaching. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's a stress response to typically temperature. But then that was between 2006 and 2008, and in 2009 he very pleasantly returned back to SAMS as a research associate, and where really I suppose the start of his interest in aquaculture started. He was working on a project of integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, as it's known, where actually you try and grow different types of species together. And then in 2010, he got a permanent position here as a lecturer in aquaculture. And that really was the start of a very productive period indeed. He was very appropriately rewarded with a promotion to senior lecturer in 2014. And it was at that point really that Adam's career really very seriously took off, where he developed all of the many skills and experiences that we now see. For example, in 2014, he was invited by the Commonwealth Secretariat to become an advisor on aquaculture for small island states. That's perhaps signalling a great interest in tropical regions. I know that's obviously he performed well in there. He was also the following year invited by the Scottish Government Ministerial Working Group to work on sustainable aquaculture. And in the same year, he was invited to join a ministerial working group on shellfish aquaculture. So by now, Adam was beginning to get a significant reputation in the field of aquaculture. He became a member of the board of directors of the Scottish Seaweed Industry Association, thus demonstrating not only his capacity for animal aquaculture, but also in seaweed aquaculture. In 2020, Adam was invited to join the IUCN Commission on ecosystem management and also the ecosystem group on aquaculture in the blue economy. And that was obviously a very important marker of his now current interests very much in the blue economy. I should say that the IUCN, for those of you who don't know, stands for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and is a very significant indicator of esteem to be able to be invited to join such a group. And so it was quite clear by then that Adam had developed a very significant global reputation in the field. And in 2022, Adam was then promoted to reader. Many people start slowing down at such a thing. Adam certainly did not, and this then prompted him to continue both his national and international leadership in the field of aquaculture. During his career, he's given evidence to the House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee, and those can be quite scary things, actually, but if you know what you're doing, you're okay. And I know I joined Adam, actually, when we both gave evidence at the Scottish Parliament Rural Affairs and Climate Change Committee, where he discharged his duties exceptionally well. Adam serves on the panel of experts for the UN World Ocean Assessment. He's an honorary fellow of the University of the Seychelles. Closer to home, Adam has been involved in the research leadership of SAMS as a co-research leader here in SAMS, and particularly in the research area that we entitle the Blue Economy in SAMS. He's chaired the University Aquaculture and Knowledge Exchange Hub and is involved with certainly was involved as the convener of the Sustainable Aquaculture Forum for the MASTS grouping, which is a consortium of Scottish universities in marine science. He's the author on 66 research papers in the scientific literature. He's co-authored 3 books and 8 reports, and he's been successful in generating, with his colleagues, over €8 million in research funding, and about £1.5 million in commercial contracts, and also has been very strongly involved in the spin-out of two companies which are in development here. He's also very actively involved in teaching, both at the undergraduate and at the postgraduate level. So I think you'll agree with me that's a really truly impressive record indeed. And so much so that in April of last year, recognising Adam's outstanding contribution to research, knowledge exchange and commercialisation, he was awarded a professorship in innovation in the blue economy. So, Adam, may I invite you, please, to come and deliver your lecture, intriguingly entitled Triggers Broom and KLF, Waypoints to Not Understanding Innovation in the Blue Economy. Now, as I mentioned, I think that is a very intriguing title, so much so that I tried to decipher it and I sort of failed, but I felt I'm beginning to learn a little bit about AI, actually, so I put the title into an AI bot, and I'll tell you what it said. I did check with Adam before saying this, because I didn't want to steal his thunder. And the AI bot says, Triggers Broom is a philosophical concept from a TV show. Some of us know what that is, I think. While KLF is an acronym for a music band. I didn't know that. Crux sentence, there is no direct connection between the two. So, rather intriguingly, they are connected in the sense of at least Adam's title of his inaugural lecture, and I'm sure we're going to hear possibly that the AI bot is wrong.
Thanks very much, Nick. Thank you. Yes, that was like having my life flash before me. So thank you for that introduction. So yes, as Nick said, the title is Triggers Broom and the KLF, Waypoints to Not Understanding the Innovation of the Blue Economy. And it is taking a risk with using cultural references like that, and I'm appreciative to the people online who may not get those cultural references, but hopefully I will have explained them sufficiently by the end that from now on the AI will indelibly link both those concepts with the blue economy. This is a unique opportunity, and so it's a unique opportunity not just to give the explanation of my academic career, but also a little bit about my personal journey and how I got to be standing here today. And I'm going to break in convention a little bit and put my thank yous right at the beginning of my presentation, because I'm going to say I did this and I did that. There's going to be a lot of I in this lecture, and I apologize for that. But I think it's important to understand that I is the result of many people coming with me on my journey and supporting me along the way. And so I wanted to put those thanks right at the beginning. So when you get bored of me talking about myself, going, yeah, it's actually the cast of thousands which have been contributed to my journey. So I'm going to start with saying thanks to SAMS and UHI as institutions. SAMS, I've worked at SAMS for the best part of coming up to 20 years, plus my PhD, and it has offered me unparalleled opportunities to follow my intellectual curiosity, to follow my intellectual curiosity within bounds pretty much wherever I've chosen to take it. And that's a rare and unique opportunity for which I'm deeply appreciative. I'd also like to thank UHI, because UHI is an absolutely brilliant institution. I'm not just saying that because they've given me a professorship. The ability to work in rural and coastal communities and to learn at the highest level within those communities is quite frankly gobsmacking, and especially for me because I don't like cities. And the opportunity to come and do a PhD in a non-city location and the opportunities for students to work in those rural locations is a brilliant idea. And yeah, so UHI and SAMS I'd like to thank. I'd also like to thank, obviously those are institutions, I'd like to thank all the people, my colleagues, both in UHI and in SAMS. undertaking any research is not a solo activity, and lots of people contribute to it, and they don't always get the acknowledgement that they require, and I don't always say thank you enough when I ask them to do strange things at ungodly hours. But I really do appreciate my colleagues putting up with me. Special mention probably goes to Kim and Liz, who have shared an office with me for a long time and put up with my mess in my desk and me moaning about various aspects. I'd also like to thank two former members of SAMS who have retired, Dr. Maeve Kelly, my PhD supervisor, my first postdoctoral supervisor, and my mentor who guided me in my career and stopped me quitting at least 3 occasions. To Professor Kenny Black, again, who was an important mentor to me in my early career as I developed my project management skills. To our PhD students and our ACES students, they are the ray of sunshine in the research career. Their single-minded enthusiasm, their focus on their research, not clouded by administration or other tasks, is energizing at the very least. And so I'd like to special thanks to them. To my friends who've picked me up many times, metaphorically and physically, along the way, and to my family, Susanna, Rufus, and Felix, you can see them here, who put up with my eccentricities, my scientific discussions around the kitchen table and me lambasting them for not being robust enough in their conjectures when describing their arguments about homework. So thank you to you all. Without you, it would not be possible. So I'm not sure I'm going to get through this one, but I'd like to thank my parents. Yeah, to my mum, who always had faith that I would make it, and to my dad, told you it was going to be touch and go, and to my dad, who taught me there's more to learn than could be learned in school. So to all these people, I'd like to say thank you, and dedicate this talk and the professorship to them. Okay, so why have I called the talk what I have called it? Well, hopefully we'll understand what triggers Broom and KLF and what the connections are there. But I wanted to call it waypoints because I think it's only looking back that you understand where the important moments are in your journey, in your career. At the time, you're just blundering around, trying to make the best choice you can. And you need a bit of perspective to understand these were critical inflection points. And both the KLF and Triggers Broom really earmark some critical inflection points to my journey. But why have I chosen to call it not understanding? Well, I think it came from, there's a box on the application form when you write your application to become a professor, and it's blank. It says, indicate your preferred chaired title, and that's a real opportunity. That's allowing you to decide what you're going to study and research for the next X years until you retire. And I was blown away by that, the freedom that gave me. And I tried to understand where was the intersection of my knowledge and my interest. And I thought, actually, no, it's not my knowledge. I want to understand the bits I don't understand. And that's where I want to work in the next 10, 15 years, whatever it is, until I retire. And so that's why I chose to think about what I didn't know and map out the boundaries of my ignorance. And the blue economy and innovation was that intersection between my interest and stuff I wanted to know more about. And there's a great quote from Karl Popper, a very famous science philosopher. It might be well to remember that while differing wildly in the various bits we know, in our infinite ignorance, we are all equal. And I think that's a really nice place to start my professorial career in. Okay, so let's see if I can link the KLF and Triggers Broom. So let's start with Triggers Broom. And as Nick mentioned, Triggers Broom is a scene from a sitcom, a BBC sitcom called Only Fools and Horses. And that is redolent of my childhood, watching Only Fools and Horses and other sitcoms with my father in front of the fire. And there was only 3 things that was ever allowed on the television in our house. One was rugby, one was BBC sitcoms, and the third was nature documentaries. The early David Attenborough films, the Voyages of Calypso with Jacques Cousteau, these are kind of what I grew up on. And I think that's what gave me the passion and interest in the natural world. And that combined with my father's own interest in the natural world. He was a game warden out in East Africa. Here's a picture of me as a wee bairn in Zambia, and me taking my first seagrass survey on the coast of Mombasa. But my father always had a deep passion for wildlife, and that combined with watching television as a child really embedded it in me. And so we moved from Zambia to Scotland, and then we moved down to the south coast of England, and I spent most of my childhood spare time on the beach, playing in the sea, playing in the surf. And so when I think back to that time, it's the memories of Only Fools and Horses and my father laughing at the Triggers broom sketch that sticks in my mind. But why is it important for my journey, except for the background? Well, it's important because I wasn't very good at school. I had real problems with education. And basically, I couldn't write. And if I did write, no one could read what I was writing. And I was in remedial classes, I was doing vocational courses, and I barely scraped enough GCSEs to get through to college, and I barely got enough A-levels to get through to university. But because I was determined to become a marine biologist by this time, I knew that I had to get through the next stage. And I kind of developed a bit of a superpower. Because I couldn't write particularly quickly, I had no real way of demonstrating the knowledge that I had. And so I had to be really quick at deciding what the important pieces of information were, and that I could write those down in the bare minimum number of words so that people marking exams or my teacher would understand that I did know what was going on, and I did understand the subject. I just couldn't put it down onto a piece of paper. And so that's a superpower that's kind of always stayed with me, that I've had this ability to distill information quickly and return it quickly. And it's done me well throughout my career. So in one aspect, that's what Triggers Broom means to me. But it also links to the blue economy in my mind. And this is how that happened. So I'm going to jump around a little bit in time, and this takes me forward to 2012. And luckily, Nick's given me a really comprehensive timeline, which you'll all remember. And you'll all remember that I spent 2 years in the States before coming back to SAMS. And I worked on a coral reef project at Ohio State University and at University of Texas. But my field sites were in Hawaii, and we were working on coral bleaching and trying to understand why some corals could die, so some corals could bleach, which means they expelled their algae where they got their food from and survive, and why some corals bleached and died. And the hypothesis we were working on is that some corals were very good at switching between getting their food from the sunshine via the algae, and some corals were less able to switch to predatory, to getting their food by predating on zooplankton from the water column. And for those corals that bleached, the ability to switch between getting your energy from the sun and getting your energy from predation, that ability gives them an advantage to survival in a changing world where bleaching is occurring more and more regularly. And so I finished that postdoc and decided it was time to come back to the UK. Susanna was pregnant with our firstborn. Hi, Rufus. And although I'd enjoyed 2 years in the States, we decided it wasn't the place we wanted to bring up a family. And so we returned to Oban, and I was lucky enough to get a postdoc with Dr. Maeve Kelly in sea urchin aquaculture. But so where's this all going and how does this connect to Triggers Broom? Well, I was sitting where you were sitting, and standing up here was Professor Lawrence Mee, and he was giving a lecture entitled Designer Oceans. And Professor Lawrence Mee was a former director of SAMS, and his argument was, and when I say his argument, this is what I took away from his argument. It may not be what he meant me to take away, but you can never tell, and unfortunately I never had that conversation with him. But his argument was that the oceans have become so fundamentally altered by human activity that we can no longer go back to a baseline. We can no longer return to a pre-human state of the ocean. There's two reasons for that. One of the reasons is that we don't know what that baseline was. We don't know what it looked like before humans arrived. And two, we simply couldn't afford to do it. We didn't have the resources and technology to do that. And while that is a damning indictment on humanity that we've changed the environment so much that we can't go back, we can't fix it, it does offer us an opportunity and a responsibility to think about how we want to use the oceans, how we can work with the oceans to deliver the goods and services that we need as a society while protecting what's left of the oceans and making sure that the oceans are still there for the next generation and the generation after to inspire the awe and wonder that they inspired. And so that was really a light bulb moment for me, and it started me thinking a little bit about the blue economy. And this is what it has to do with Triggers Broom. So Triggers Broom is a sketch, as I said, from the BBC sitcom. And Trigger is a road sweeper, that road sweeper by profession. And he's proudly declaiming to his friends about how he's looked after his broom for the last 20 years. And he says, I've looked after this broom so well, I've had it for 20 years. It's had 17 new heads and 14 new handles. And when asked the question of, how do you know it's the same broom? He says, well, of course it's the same broom. Here's a picture of it. What more proof do you need? And I remember my father laughing at that joke. And it's an old joke. It dates back to Theseus's ship that sailed around the Mediterranean so many times that every sail, every rope, every plank, every nail had been replaced. And the philosophers asked this question, is it the same ship that started off sailing around the oceans? And we can ask the same question about the oceans. Is it the same ocean that we had when we started, though we've so fundamentally altered it? And it doesn't matter whether we think it is or it isn't. The fact is that Trigger had looked after his broom well enough that it was still working, even though he'd fundamentally changed all the components of it. It was still doing the same job that he needed it to do. And that, for me, is a little bit about the essence of what the blue economy is about. It's about ensuring we can make use of the oceans in such a way that they are there for perpetuity, for people to use. And when I say use, I don't just mean fish. I mean to go out and do the sports, the activities, the diving, whatever causes the wonder in them that makes them want to go to the ocean. And so instead of Triggers Broom, we can call it Triggers Ocean. So, as I said, this was around 2012. And at the same time, in a conference in the UN, a UN conference called Rio Plus 20, small island developing states were beginning to think about their marine space as a space that they could use for development. And the concept of the blue economy was coined around 2012, in that it was the idea that you could decouple economic growth from environmental degradation and use the oceans as a development space, but make sure they were available in perpetuity for generation after generation. And that's a great concept to have, but what does it actually mean? How do we define what activities fit within the blue economy? How can we make sure that the activities we are undertaking in the marine environment ensure that we can have economic growth, but decouple it from environmental degradation? And I've done some work and some thinking around this, and whether it's including aquaculture within marine protected areas, whether it's using market-based tools to allow the commodification of ecosystem services. There's lots of aspects to how we use the marine environment in a way that doesn't, that allows economic growth, but doesn't degrade the environment. But crucially, I think at the kernel of what we should think of as the blue economy is that we need to replenish the capital, the natural capital in the marine environment from which all our goods and services flow from. If you think of a bank account, the interest that flows to you is a result of the size of that capital lump you have in your bank account. If we think about the benefits we can get from the marine environment, the better the state of the environment, the higher the level of natural capital in the environment, the more we can gain from it in terms of ecosystem services. And that might be direct ecosystem services like food and energy, but it also might be cultural ecosystem services like recreation or spiritual ecosystem services. And to me, that is a hub that we need to build a marine economy that replenishes natural capital, not depletes it. And that's really important for coastal communities because we're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis, we're in the middle of the climate crisis, and there are new industries being developed as a result of both of those crises, marine energy, aquaculture, habitat restoration. But these industries will be focused and based in coastal communities, and it's really important that the benefits from these new industries are delivered to the coastal communities where these industries are embedded, because also the blue economy is something that happens to it gets externalized. It's something that's put on coastal communities, where in fact it's important that the coastal communities are at the center of the development. So for me, that triggers broom analogy is both an analogy for the blue economy and a reminder of where I came from in my childhood. So what about the KLF? Well, this is where the link, again, it links to an important aspect, and I link the KLF to innovation, but I also link it to a slightly more difficult point in my career when I'd finished my university degree. And I scraped by with a 2-2 because the examination process was based on a handwritten exam, 3 hours long, 4 of those 3-hour-long handwritten exams, and if you couldn't write, it was a difficult uphill struggle. And so I came out with a 2-2, and I kind of entered what I termed a little bit about lost years. Now, I was having some good times there. I was surfing a lot, but I was not progressing in my ambition to become a marine biologist. I took an expedition to East Africa, got some great experience, but for 2 years I could not progress my career as a marine biologist. And those were difficult times, and I almost got to the point of saying, right, I'm going to give up on this dream and go and do something else instead. But luckily I saw an advert for the master's course at York, which Nick mentioned. And they were going to take me with a 2-2 as long as I paid for my own way. And I didn't have the money, but I took a loan out. And I went on the master's course, and it was a real inflection point. It gave me the skills I needed to start my research career. And more importantly, in those 3 years, between finishing my degree and starting my master's, word processing had happened. And I no longer had to handwrite my exams. I could now type them out very slowly, but it didn't matter how slowly I typed because people could read it and there was a spell checker. And instead of exams, I had 3 research projects. And so I came out of that master's with a reasonable master's and managed to walk into a job as a fisheries observer in the Falkland Islands. And I spent 18 months working on the multinational deep water fleet that operates around the Falkland Islands, spending 4 to 6 weeks at a time at sea. And it was an amazing opportunity to see how big the seafood industry is. I'd worked in East Africa and I'd seen how small artisanal fisheries worked. And now I've got an opportunity to see how these multinational fleets from Taiwan, from China, from Korea, from Spain, they spent 3 years at sea at a time. They never touched land. They transferred their fish at sea. They refueled at sea. And it was a great way to understand what a big industry the seafood industry is. It also exceptionally well-paid job. I managed to clear my debts, and it allowed me to move on to a job in Fiji. I spent 2 years in Fiji, diving on some coral reefs, trying to set up a national park for the National Trust of Fiji, playing some great rugby, drinking kava, and it's also where I met Susanna. And we seemed to be able to tolerate each other to a certain extent. And so we decided that we would look for our next step together. And we were offered the opportunity of setting up a marine project in the Bahamas. So we swapped Fiji for the Bahamas and spent a year setting up a marine research project in the Bahamas. We set up the project twice, in fact, because a Category 4 hurricane came through and destroyed our first camp, and we had to set it up again. Unfortunately, at the end, or towards the end of the year, a good friend died in a diving accident. And to us, that was a symbol, a signal that we had to come home. It was time for us to come home. And so we weren't quite sure how that was going to happen, but I saw an advertisement in the New Scientist for a PhD at the Scottish Association for Marine something, but it was in Oban, and we knew Oban because Susanna had taken me there as one of our holiday haunts, and we both decided we would quite like to move to Oban, and so I applied for the PhD, and I sat on a beach in the Bahamas and did a phone interview to the boardroom, wherever it was at the time, and they accepted me onto the PhD program, and we came back to the UK. But all the time, and I guess I kind of missed this out, where's the relevance of the KLF? All the time, especially in the lost years, I was listening to the KLF. Dance music was my thing, and driving up and down the country, surfing and listening to dance music symbolized my lost years. And I traveled the world with a battered C90, yeah, ask your parents, cassette of the KLF as a soundtrack to my life. And just note, I got accepted at SAMS on the PhD, but only later did Maeve Kelly, who was my supervisor, tell me how hard she had to fight to get me accepted onto the PhD program, because I only had a 2.2, and that wasn't deemed to be enough by UK academic standards. So there's a reason I'm labouring this point. So that's one place the KLF was a waypoint. The second place is, as Nick mentioned, I got this large project working on IMTA. It was a £15 partner project, £6 million project. And I was lucky enough to, with the help of Kenny Black, write the project and coordinate the project. And the idea of IMTA is you turn some of the waste products that come out of aquaculture into seaweed and shellfish. And so you reduce the environmental impact and you create extra profits by creating extra products. It's a great idea. It's been around for a while. And we worked with 5 or 6 companies going through the process of developing IMTA systems. And we did some really good science. But at the end of the 4 years, it was really clear that none of the companies were going to take their pilot scale IMTA systems and create commercial scale systems. And there's a lot of discussion about why that was. Why, if it was such a good idea, why weren't they going to do it? And there's a lot of talk in the consortium about it's because you needed to educate the consumers, or you needed to educate the regulators, or you needed to educate the producers about the benefits of IMTA. And something rang hollow to me at that point, because the producers and the regulators and the consumers, they're pretty educated anyway. They don't need really scientists to tell them how to produce aquaculture products or how to regulate or how to buy. But we were in a mindset that we couldn't understand why they weren't adopting this technology. So we'd done great research, but we hadn't managed to innovate enough to allow people to implement IMTA. And that started me thinking about why that was. And I began to think that it was around the fact that I was looking at this from the wrong perspective. I was coming at this problem as a marine scientist, as a marine ecologist. And it was all a question of perspectives and understanding the trade-offs from different points of view. And at the time, I just happened to be reading a rock biography of the KLF. And this book by John Higgs explained what some of the influences on the band, the KLF. And one of their main influences was a countercultural philosopher called Robert Anton Wilson. And I'd never heard about him. So I went in and delved a bit deeper. And he talks about reality tunnels and self-referential reality tunnels. And where we fail to communicate, it may be because we have different realities, different backgrounds, different perspectives to come from. And that rang a bell in my head. That was what was going on around the IMTA issue. I had a very specific reality tunnel that was a marine ecologist's reality tunnel. And I looked at everything through the lens of a marine ecologist. And from a marine ecologist's point of view, IMTA makes perfect sense. The trophic linkages, the win-win makes perfect sense. But if you are looking at it through from a producer's or a consumer's perspective, you have a different reality. And so, to me, this is at the heart of what innovation means. So, as I say, we've done great research, but we've failed to innovate. And to innovate, you need a whole range of different knowledges. It's not just academic knowledge you need. You need industrial knowledge, you need regulatory knowledge, and you need societal knowledge, because society is the ultimate user of the technology. And this really started me thinking about, okay, so I'm a marine ecologist, but a lot of the problems I'm facing, I can't crack with a marine ecology hammer. I need another tool in my toolbox to start thinking about these complex problems. And luckily, SAMS at that time, and still does, had a vibrant social science department or group. And I managed to get some funding for 2 social science PhDs in 2017 to look at how people relate to marine industry, specifically aquaculture, because I was still very much interested in aquaculture. And it reinforced this idea that people have a strong worldview, and where industries are aligned with that worldview, then they're accepted. So that's why you get mining communities and you get forestry communities, because those communities have a strong association with those industries. You don't get aquaculture communities yet, because it's a new industry, and therefore there isn't that strong identification of communities with that industry. And so by understanding that we needed to look at a range of perspectives if we were going to innovate, then that really started my interest in the process of innovation as a whole. And so as Triggers Broom is the waypoint for the blue economy, my waypoint for innovation is the KLF, in that we need a range of different perspectives, a diversity of perspectives, if we are to make innovation happen. And innovation is that process of taking the great knowledge that we develop as scientists and making it useful for society, whether it's products or services. But to do that, we can't do that in isolation. We need industry, we need society, and we need the regulators, because ultimately any innovation will need to be regulated under some sort of policy or regulation. So only by bringing all four of those partners together do we get effective innovation. And I really became so interested in the process of innovation that I became involved in two spin-out companies. One called Notion, which is growing marine proteins and lipids on different waste sources, and one is Sea Dyes, which is taking pigments from marine sources and turning them into fabric dyes or other uses. And I've been involved with these companies for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's been a real educational journey. It's taught me how to see in some of those different reality tunnels, investor reality tunnels. Investor reality tunnels are totally different to scientist reality tunnels, but we need to be aware that these reality tunnels exist. And it is really important that when we go back to the idea of the blue economy, we are aware that there are these different reality tunnels, that coastal communities have a different set of perceptions from marine scientists, because we're going to have to face these challenges of climate change and biodiversity crisis, and we need innovation to deal with those challenges. And that innovation has got to include all the stakeholders, whether it's industry, whether it's communities, scientists. Everybody needs to be taking a role in shaping that. And we can only do that if we appreciate that we all have these different reality tunnels. And I've got the KLF to thank me for telling me about reality tunnels. So I think that is how you tie the KLF to Triggers Broom through a slightly convoluted journey that I've been on. And I'm just going to loop back before I finish, because I've laboured the point about my poor academic performance. And I haven't done that just on a whim. I've done that really as a plea, because I've said that we need a range and diversity of knowledges to make innovation, to solve problems. We also need a range of neurotypes to make those decisions. We need to be as diverse as we can to come up with all the solutions that we require. And it wasn't a given that I was standing here today. There's lots of places on the journey that I've described where I could have ended up somewhere else. And a lot of that was around the fact that I had the learning difficulty or the neurodiversity that I have. But I've got survivor bias. I got through it. But I think higher education, PhDs, academia, that's a difficult place for neurodiverse people. And we've made huge, huge progress in making all institutions more inclusive. And it's not any implied criticism about any institution, but it's just a plea that we need to have as many diverse points of view at the table if we are going to create the blue economy that allows us to have the oceans that we want for decades and generation after generation. And I will stop there. Thank you very much. Do you want to escape away from me? Cool. Okay.
Right. I think we need 2 mics, so you hold that one.
Okay.
Hopefully this one's working okay. Is it? Okay, right, great. Adam, that was outstanding, actually. And I think you beautifully showed us, actually, that there is this fantastic connection for you with those 2 metaphors, I guess, of the broom and KLF. Fantastic. And your final point, of course, is a very important one, and one that we're working very hard on in SAMS, actually, to create a diverse organisation. So I think you're right in terms of success in the blue economy. I think to have a successful organisation, to be as best that we can, we do need a complete diversity as well. So that's a very well-made point indeed. So thank you for that. We're now open to questions. We will be able to take questions from those people online, and that will be communicated to us. But meanwhile, do we have any questions in the audience to start with? Please, thank you. Just if you could just wait for a mic. There's one there for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wondered, Adam, your definition of, to create a blue economy, there's going to be winners and losers.
Yep.
There is in every change.
Yep.
I represent the losing side because I represent fishermen.
Okay.
I represent mobile fishermen, which is even worse. It's like, we're talked about like the devil now. But, there's two words that seem to get floated around. The first time I heard them was before the introduction of the inshore marine protected areas. And politicians, everybody told us that there would be a just transition. And that was a long time ago. And there is no just transition for people like us. There's a forced transition. Just transition are two words floating about in people's heads who are not affected. That's the way we see it. And I just wondered how you would define just transition.
I think, and thank you for the question, and I think you're right. There will always be winners and losers, but it's not a zero-sum game, which means that just because there are winners and losers, it doesn't mean that the totality cannot get bigger. And therefore, that winners and losers may just be a positional statement rather than an absolute statement. I'm not saying it is in your case, but I'm just, there's a certain amount of thinking that if there's winners and losers, it's a zero-sum game. The pie doesn't get any bigger, but the pie can get bigger. And it's managing that to ensure that those who are most affected have a voice in it. But we also need to recognise that there's a need for change in some circumstances, but it needs to be managed in a way that brings people along with them. Now, I think, without getting into the politics or the HMPA announcement, is that was a very good example of how not to include communities that are impacted. And that was people looking at the problem with only one or two lenses, if you say, they without the recognition of the worldview of the fishing community. And so what does a just transition mean for me? It is about that inclusiveness, and that's a bit of a sugar-coated word because it's easy, but there, as you say, there will be peoples whose livelihoods are being impacted, but there are peoples whose livelihoods are being impacted now by climate change and by the biodiversity crisis. And by not changing and not addressing those crises, we are putting my people who I work with in Fiji, their beach is disappearing, their coral reefs are disappearing. And so we have to make a change. I'm not saying, so fishing, biodiversity, climate, they are all interconnected, and so we need to make a change. But the challenge is, and it's not easy, and these aren't simple problems. The challenge is, how do we do that in a way that is inclusive to those communities? And I don't know. I don't have that answer for the fishing communities. But I don't have that answer what it looks like for your case. But I would hope that if we can move beyond that idea that because someone's winning, someone else is losing proportionately the same amount, the zero-sum game, we can move beyond that and see this is an additive game, that by rebuilding those stocks of marine natural capital, we make the whole pie bigger in time. And so, yeah, I don't have an answer. It's a long winded way of saying that. Because they challenge your question, but thank you.
Yeah. Great question.
Pardon?
Anybody?
Is anyone online?
Is there a question online?
Hello, we have one question online here. It's from Francis Quirk. I work in health innovation, and AI has been at the forefront of recent developments in assessment, diagnosis, information management and technological advances. In what ways will AI influence the blue economy and ways of working?
Oh, excellent. Another nice, easy question. Yeah, it is a really good question. And I think AI becomes fundamental to everything we do as scientists and in innovation. And so whether it's from data capturing, using AI to interpret thousands of images that we can collect now, whether it's used to collect real-time data from fisheries boats as they bring in the haul, and then integrates that data into larger repositories. I think there has never been more data in the world than there is now, and the rate that the data grows is astounding. I think what we need to do is use AI to turn that data into information, and that information into knowledge, and then the human in the loop turns that knowledge perhaps into wisdom, so that we can better manage the marine economy. So data integration, data collection, I think AI plays a big role, but we need humans in the loop to understand the context, to use our different reality lenses for human society to understand how that data and information is used to create knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, you said around the IMTA and the challenges around the perspective tunnels between the two different parties. You see, bridging that, is it a matter of an understanding of the other person's tunnel, or empathy, or is there something more than that?
I think empathy is absolutely critical, and I think it is a first step, and what I totally failed to do within the project is acknowledge that the people have different paradigms, and the paradigm you have is not the paradigm someone else has. And so just simply by acknowledging that, you take a big step forward. But empathy is crucial, and it's time. I've been involved in a number of industry projects. And a good example is we had textile engineers, offshore engineers, and marine biologists working together. And it took us 3 years just to get a common language where we could understand what the textile engineers were meant when they talked about the weft and the warp or the fabric, or what the offshore engineers talked about when they're talking about shackles, and what we were talking about when we talked about gametophytes and seaweed. And it takes a long time to build up that common understanding, and you've got to have people who are willing to step beyond their discipline. And so it talks this idea of this transdisciplinary knowledge that we need. And no one person can supply that. And so it's building the trust and the empathy between the group of people who are innovating so that they can talk their own language freely and feel that they're being understood.
Thank you.
What 3 practical things in the next 5 years would you like to see happen for the blue economy?
Okay. 3 things. That's a really good question. And I should know this because I should be thinking about what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I think I think we still have a job to do to understand and define what the blue economy is. It's like a just transition. It's a phrase that gets bandied around an awful lot without a full understanding of what it means. And does it mean business as usual, or does it mean a specific regenerative approach to managing the blue economy? So a definition is always a good place to start. And then I think a recognition that our marine environment is a crucial driver for economic growth. I don't know, I was dull enough to read the government's industrial strategy, and there's almost no mention of the marine space within the industrial strategy. There's lots on AI, lots on manufacturing, but we need to understand that one of the greatest assets we have as a country, as Scotland and as the UK, is our marine resources. So there's that political recognition. And then I think really it's about workforce and training. We have, I think, an explosion of, well, I hope there'll be an explosion of marine activity, but we need a trained workforce for that. And the skills that are required are really, really different to what exists within the existing common economy. So I think, yeah, definition, further recognition, and the workforce to deliver that blue economy.
We've got a couple more questions online now. One of them is from Catherine Hughes. She asked, would you recommend doing a few years in conservation before going into aquaculture? That is my current plan, and I'd like a professional opinion on this.
No relation?
Yes. No relation, I don't think. But yes, I think whatever your experience is, and if conservation is what excites you and motivates you, then yes, absolutely. But it doesn't really matter whether it's conservation or whether it's statistics or whatever it is. If you go and follow your passions for a couple of years, then you're only going to gain in skills, and those skills can always be brought back to aquaculture if that's where you choose to go. But you may find after 2 years in conservation, actually you want to go and do something else. Or you may find out there's a real big crossover between conservation, aquaculture, and habitat restoration, and that's where you're going to focus your career because your conservation skills are highly appropriate for that. So I would think any experience is good experience and helps you kind of see what you might want to do in the future.
We've got one more question as well from Andrew Davey. He asked, what is your vision for a responsibly managed blue economy for Scotland's coastal communities over the next 10 to 15 years?
Okay, yeah. I hope no one wanted their tea tonight because this is a long one. I guess it is around that inclusivity of the blue economy. As I said, that I think the coastal communities of Scotland and the island communities have high levels of social deprivation. They have fuel poverty, they have depopulation, they have a range of issues going on, but they are at the crux or the centre of a number of new industries. And so how do we square that circle where the new industries will be embedded in these communities, but they are suffering from aspects of deprivation and related to their rural and coastal the rural and coastal locations? Can we create that blue economy that allows the value of those products to be captured on those islands and coastal communities? And instead of exporting electrons down to the central belt, can we make use of those electrons in the coastal communities? Can we make use of the fish that are captured and grown in those coastal communities so the value is added in the coastal communities rather than being exported to other places where the value is added? And so I think I talked right at the beginning about the wonders of UHI of allowing this high quality education in these coastal and rural communities. I think the similar thing could be done for the blue economy, where instead of being at the marginal fringes of our geography, they are at the centre or the interface between the marine and the terrestrial environment and where the industries are based. So yeah, I don't know how long that will take.
Wow. Great answer.
Thank you very much. I haven't got any more questions. I've just got a couple comments from people in the chat here. One of them's from Sarah Walmsley. She says, thank you for this really helpful discussion around blue economy, presenting perspectives that were new for me, but very logical and inspiring. And lastly, we've got a comment from Oscar Bailey saying, not a question, but from a lifelong friend of getting on for 50 years, Nags has undoubtedly made many people proud with his achievements. He's come a long way since being that little lad who always wore shorts at school. Wishing you well and enjoy your success, Neil and family.
Great. Great comment. Great comment. We'll have one final question from Andy in the room. Andy.
If the KLF got in touch with you tomorrow and said, we never actually burnt that £1 million on the beach on Jura, but we've been waiting for someone to use our name in the title of an inaugural professorial lecture, and you can have that £1 million to do exactly what you want with to make the ocean a better place, what would you do?
Wow. I must admit, I would be a little bit disappointed to find out they didn't burn that £1 million, because I think that's a fundamentally interesting concept, and subject to perhaps another lecture when I retire. But what would I do with that £1 million? I guess I would like to support a generation of the next marine scientists through maybe reflecting some of that discussion about neurodiversity and supporting scientists to reach the potential, and so that we can, as science, we can reach a full innovation potential by having as many perspectives around the table as possible. Yeah, so maybe that's how I'd use £1 million.
Excellent. So thank you for that excellent question. Brilliant answer, Adam. So really all that's left for me to do is, on behalf of us all, is to thank you most sincerely for a fascinating, illuminating and educational lecture, and also really to welcome you to the UHI Professoriate. I think we're very privileged to have you amongst our number. And so thank you very much, Adam, and welcome. Thank you very much, Nick. Okay, thank you very much. And for those of you online, thank you very much. We'll cut you off while we go next door to have some refreshments. So for those of you who would like to, we can go into the beautifully named Purple Room next door. Thank you.
Thank you very much.